Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beer Blather 179. Robots are losers. And we'll explain that to you in a moment because it could have a host of different meanings. Before we even start, let's go with the usual litany. We're starting, of course, at Odyssey and also at YouTube and Twitter. Uh, I love it. It's the new Prince. The platform formerly known as Twitter. Give me a fucking break. It's Twitter, okay? And it's gonna die Twitter, and I don't care how many letters of the alphabet they decide to replace it with. The blue bird of discontent shall remain the blue bird of discontent, at least to us. Uh, Apparently, they had an electronic trans surgery and became an X. But that means nothing to me. And a couple of words. You guys in YouBoob, we don't like YouBoob and we don't like to stay there. So we're going to cut you off as soon as we remember YouBoob exists and before we start sharing videos and all that jazz, because we don't want to have stupid, useless arguments and waste hours of our life arguing with a bunch of nincompoops about what constitutes fair use and what doesn't. So screw them, and we're going to go before we start sharing any kind of material. We will remain on Odyssey, which is the only one with a chat we actually pay any attention to, and that may, from time to time, result in our answering your questions, depending on how we feel and whether your question is interesting enough. And not such possibility in Twitter, that you are encouraged and welcomed to leave your opinions as, if not comments, replies to this broadcast. We will leave it there till the end. And if Twitter doesn't like us, they can cancel us because, hey, what the fuck? We don't give a shit anymore. As long as we have Odyssey as a playground, the rest of them are, well, okay, they're there. Big deal. If you want to support us, there are several ways to do that. One, becoming a member of this channel, like so many have. And you have to come to Odyssey, click on join right under the screen, and become a member. The base membership is $2.50 per week. And oh boy, do you get a lot of stuff for that. And you also get the VIP room on Tuesdays, which is for members only, and other freebies that we may from time to time offer just because we freaking feel like it. Am I pandering enough, Thomas?
Are you... I didn't catch the last word.
Pandering.
Pandering, yes, you are pandering.
It's like, this is the ABC of pandering. We don't give a shit, okay? Now, going back to the thing, the other way is to contribute to the chat, just like super chats in YouBoob. You contribute through the chat in Odyssey, and it gets shown over there so everybody knows how generous you are. And it tells us that you like what you are seeing. And the third way, of course, is to contribute to quadverum.com/support us. Very simple, don't need to spell it. quadverum.com/support us, where you contribute directly to SQV and this channel. After all the expenses come from the same pocket. And having said all of that, let me put a banner here so that people know what they're watching. Believe it or not, it's necessary. Every now and then, Thomas, I put the wrong sign in the wrong program, and nobody ever calls me on it. I wonder if anybody actually sees this thing.
Well, they're mesmerized.
Yes. And having said all of that, and not wanting to overstay my welcome, here's Thomas Wictor, the only living expert in World War I flamethrowers from California. Poor thing. Every time I say that, I feel, something that is cold and warm, like something you put on a torn muscle. The land of Governor Gruesome. This is worse than a terror film from the 50s, people. And moi, little old moi, Saul Montes-Bradley, the expert in nothing but largest human repository of useless information, still from my golden cage in Florida. Ready to waste an hour of our time and yours, or two or three last time. God forbid. We were having so much fun, we didn't even notice. And there we go. How are you doing, Thomas?
Well, last night, the neighbor called us because a group of young men were casing the house next door to her, which is currently being worked on. So nobody's living there.
Ooh.
So, being the type of person she is, she went out and confronted them, and they completely ignored her. She told them she's going to call the police, and they kind of went, eh. Then she called my brother and me. So we were like,
not again.
We went out there suitably prepared, but they'd already left. And then my brother called the owner of the house, and he came over and checked everything out. But I just shudder because given what's happening in this state, you don't go out and confront people. I just saw a video from San Francisco where the cops served a warrant, and a man came out of nowhere and he said, "Ain't no cops in my hood. Ain't no cops in my hood," and demanded that they release the guy. So they called for backup, and backup immediately showed up with 2 rifles, and they told him they could see he had a gun in his right pocket, which he had his hand on. And one of the cops was saying, "If you don't take your hand out of your pocket, I'm going to shoot you in the head." So the guy pulls the gun, and he gets shot in the head. And he goes down like a telephone pole, and that's the end of him. And then
play stupid games.
A crowd materializes, and they're doing that, I guess, outrage screeching.
Yeah.
And those are, they had rifles pointing at this guy, and he was like, "So what?" So my 70-year-old neighbor going out to confront these little hoodlums, what do you think they're going to do? And I was in no mood to go out there, but the only reason I did was because in case they decided they were going to start beating on her or whatever else. They didn't, but it's like, and the laws in California are such that what I did is illegal. And it's like, yeah. What's that old saying? I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Absolutely.
I
subscribe to that theory.
Well, see, I don't go out to confront people. We have security cameras and all that, and we have a big fence, and the house is hardened, so I'm not worried. And as I told you, I'm gonna buy a new rifle. But
you wanted a shotgun or a rifle?
I have a shotgun. I'm getting a rifle. It's
nice
45-70 caliber, and I'm just going to get it because I saw it in a movie.
You like elephant hunting too.
Well, okay. I know everybody loves the AR-15 and all that, but
it's a toy.
the AR-15 does have its penetration issues, because if somebody's, a professional or whatever, I'm not talking about bringing this thing out at the drop of a hat. I'm going to buy it as a device of last resort in case, home invasions are a thing in California by armored men who, use police rams and all of that. So if anything like that ever happens, I don't actually want an AR-15. I want, I think it's a Henry. It's a lever action. It looks just like the old Winchester cowboy gun, except it's very short and it's got an extremely thick, powerful barrel. And, it's actually...
You're half Mexican. You're entitled to a 30-30 with two cananas filled with ammo.
No, it holds 5 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. So
yeah,
I'm not going to need any more than that. And I know people talk about, you should, okay, in California, you're limited to 10 anyway. I bought a magazine extension for my shotgun, and, it still holds under 10. But I just figured, if you're going to get something, why not get the most efficient something?
Yes. And this one, you have 1 in chamber, 5 in the clip. If you need more than 6 shots, you're in a whole world of trouble.
Especially using a 45-70.
Yeah.
If somebody comes in and they're all jocked up in their body armor, the way it seems to be happening more and more, and it's more than one, and the guy behind see the man in front just explode, then they're going to get the hell out. They're not going to, do anything else. But this situation here is the closest we've ever come to an issue. And granted, the house is vacant, and it's obviously vacant. The guy who bought it is, surprise, off his rocker, and he had all these big plans, and I think he's got a very short attention span or something. He's got like a million, and what is the phrase? Irons in the fire. He's got like a million irons in the fire, and he's a one-man show, so he's doing all the work himself. So it's going to take him a good 10 years to rehab that house. And the neighbor is your classic older woman who sits at the window, for funny business. And we get called a lot about funny business. And it's just really interesting that, once again, I'm somewhat tethered to an obstreperous older person. And I'm old myself now, as you know.
I'm going to think you're half as jinxed as I am. as you know, I've been involved in the past week in ceremonies to exorcise bad luck. The only thing left for me to do is kill a black chicken at the beach as an offering to Yemanja.
Well, it's never easy. In my case, the both parents did make their own exits into the next plane. They made it as difficult as possible for themselves and everyone else around them. Your parents, your father didn't do that, and your mother isn't.
No, on the contrary.
So,
can you believe it's going to be a year?
Oh, sure.
In a couple of weeks.
Yeah. No, it's been 10 years for since my parents stepped out, and that's just weird. It's like,
it is.
It's not that it seems such a short time ago, but it's just, the whole concept is really weird. Because,
to me, it's surreal.
It is surreal. We were built initially to live about 25, 30 years max. Like
Well,
they found Cro-Magnons that were old men at the age of 35 or something.
yeah.
And now with various cloning advances around the corner, I mean, theoretically, even in this
I mean,
country,
come on. When I was a kid, and this is something I told you, my father said something that I think is one of the wisest statements. He said, when I was a kid, a 65-year-old was an old man. A 75-year-old was ancient.
well,
An 85-year-old was an oddity. I'm way over that. I beat the odds. And whatever happens, I'm happy. I got every drop of juice out of this orange I could. And
yeah,
and that brings me to this. When we were kids, a 65-year-old man was old. They were ready to go play dominoes in the square with the other retirees. Now, at 90, they're popping Viagra's, playing golf, and trying to help the nurse.
well, my maternal grandparents were like American history fanatics, and they collected books and magazines and ephemera. And there was this joke greeting card that you were supposed to give to your 40-year-old woman on her 40th birthday, and it showed like this hideous crone. 40 was the end of the world. The hippies don't trust anyone over the age of 30.
35.
Whatever it
Was
was.
it 30?
And
Well, 30, 35, whatever the fuck. It's the same idea.
yeah, and it's chronology doesn't really matter
No.
anymore.
It's
Uh,
like you have these kids today that start at you like boomer. Yes, and incidentally, I am a fucking boomer, a real one. And it's like, oh, shut up, you little pubic hair. I'm almost 65. I feel like I'm 30. I feel actually better than when I was 20. And I have a lot of fuel left in me. So watch out, little twerp, because if you
well,
press me just a little bit, I'll steal your girlfriend just to show you off.
well, these age obsessed people are crazy because they haven't invented the non-aging person. I remember when millennials were like, "Hey, we're gonna live forever," and now millennials are considered old. When Ocasio Cortez played a video game with these Zoomers, they said it was like playing with my grandmother. And she was like 32 at the time or something.
Yeah.
And I mean, none of this matters. I mean, I remember one of my brothers, the Minnesota brother, said that you're getting old when teenage girls don't look at you anymore. And it's like, are you still looking at teenage
Shit.
girls?
I was gonna say, are you out of your fucking mind, you perv?
These teenagers who go by, we have a high school at the end of the street. They look like they're 8 years old to me. Like I don't
Yeah.
care. I mean, they're children. They're
I
children.
think I think I told you once we had this conversation before in private, uh, never on the air, but I'm gonna say it on the air. When my eldest daughter asked me to take her to a variety of colleges while she was considering where to attend, I went with her, and I was, looking forward to taking my daughter to colleges where I could find all of those college girls again, you see. And then we got there, and I saw the college girls, and I realized they were children.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, God, I used to be attracted to these girls. Now I see them as children,
Well, I mean, okay,
which I
theoretically,
think is nature functioning as it should.
yeah. I don't oppose enormous age differences between couples, but I do have to say, when you see some stunning young woman with some bloated old man, I think it's laughable. I think
Yeah.
the man looks like an idiot because she's obviously there for the money or whatever. Um, the model Anna Nicole Smith was involved with a guy who was like pushing 80, and she was,
90.
yeah, on and on. He was in a wheelchair, and he was just like, he looked like Father Time. He's like, ah! And if I were him, I'd be embarrassed. I'd be embarrassed to be seen together. And these men, I mean, if the girl's getting money out of it, whatever, more power to her. But in the case of the man, he just looks like a fool. He looks like a clown. And I know you're supposed to have a trophy. Wait, when I used to take my walks in Pasadena, um, I'd drive over there and walk because old Pasadena is really nice to walk in. Nobody believes in curtains. They all believe that they should have no curtains so they can show off the riches of their houses, the
Ooh.
inside. And
It
I
used
did
to be
not
like that in the valley too.
I did not see a single man under the age of about 60, and I did not see a single woman over the age of about 45 or 50. And I started realizing that a lot of these men had married a trophy wife when they were, say, 50 and she was
Yeah.
like 25. Now he was like 80 and she's like 55 and she looks terrible. She's all bitter. She's hooked to
Mm.
this old man, and she's more of a nurse than anything. He's shuffling around like Joe Biden, just going, well, where's my pudding? And she's like, it's over there, ask the nanny, whatever. And she's looking at her watch. Aren't you supposed to die right about now? And I was fascinated. Every single house is like that, and they actually had giant oil portraits of themselves over the fireplace and stuff
Oh,
like that. It was,
isn't that? Yeah, I was gonna say Latin Teresa having an oil. And by the way, usually they're almost as bad as Obama's portrait in the White House.
oh yeah, where he looks like he's sitting on the crapper, and
Yes,
but he
because
was like, oh, it's wonderful. It's like, yes, yes.
it's yeah, no, no. If you're gonna have a bad painting, have a good photograph.
Well, okay, Obama is like such a buffoon on so many levels. Breitbart was breathlessly reporting that it's now been proven that Obama's pulling the strings in the Biden White House, and it's like,
No, you don't. You tell me it isn't so.
well, also,
Wow,
well, good, good.
really?
Look what a screw up Obama was in terms of talk about a guy leaving no legacy whatsoever. Like, I mean, it was just pathetic. And
Yeah.
now with these
His legacy is his frustration because he couldn't realize his homosexual dreams.
well, I just think that he was like
He actually said that.
I think he's like the author Stephen King. That Stephen King he and J.K. Rowling are the most successful authors in human history. They're both billionaires, but Stephen King always wanted to be taken seriously, and it's like you don't have the skill to be taken seriously. That I used to be a big Stephen King fan when I was very young, and let
I
me tell
never bought into him.
knocked Spang out of his shoes. That's in every book. Um, a crapping, pissing, or farting reference on every third or fourth page. That's in every book. Um, you know, grammatical mistakes like you wouldn't believe because he and Rowling, yes, it's spelled
Rolling.
pronounced Rowling. He and Rowling have contracts that don't allow editors to change a word in their manuscripts. So you have to be a really brilliant author to get away with that.
Yes,
And
or a complete and utter moron.
he writes 3 or 4 novels a year. He said it takes him about a month and a half per novel, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, I bet I have not read one of them yet. But by the looks of you, a month and a half is just about right for the results.
he was much better in the beginning, if you could call the one brilliant book he wrote that was almost brilliant. It's called The Stand, and it's about a flu, a world pandemic flu that kills almost all the world, and um,
No, how original.
the survivors are divided into two camps. One is the good camp who follow a 108-year-old lady, and the other is the evil camp based in Las Vegas that follows the walking dude who's a demon or whatever. And unfortunately, the longer it goes on, the worse it gets, and the the denouement is it just keeps going and going and going. And he was very angry because they cut out 200 odd pages. So he eventually had the book republished with everything taken out once he got big enough. And the republished version is just like it's
Right.
it's literally got a bathroom
An extra 200 pages of worthless gibbering.
of poopy caca. Of poopy caca.
Oof.
It literally has a pee, a poo, and a fart or a fart reference on every single page. I got so distracted, I just decided to check. And this thing is 1,000 odd pages long. And it's like, farting, 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 pissing, pissing, crapping, crapping. And it's like, this man is obsessed. He is obsessed with the bathroom. And I just don't, all I can say is his toilet training.
Maybe,
Either
I was going to say, maybe he never quite overcame the anal stage of development when kids discover their assholes and shit.
or maybe it was toilet training was so fun that he can't move beyond it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, he says he was raised by a single mother. Okay, but he's not been entirely forthcoming about a lot of things. So he's a carefully built up character. Um, the character of Stephen King is almost certainly very different from the man, but and now he's like a rabid leftist who's
He was like that. He lives in or probably I don't know if he still does because I haven't been there for a while. But he lived in Bangor
yep.
at a house, maybe 5 houses away from my cousin Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I saw the house, I said, "What kind of fucking psycho lives here?" And Jimmy looks at me and says, "Stephen King. There's a party tonight."
Yeah.
And it, the perimeter is, this wrought iron fence with infernal allegories,
Mm-hmm.
tridents and flames and shit like that. It's like the entrance to hell in Dante's Inferno. And a little bit is cute, but when you overdo it. And of course, his house was drug central for Bangor.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a party that night. It was like the 80s, tables full of coke. This guy was in a constant daze.
Yeah.
I don't think I've saw him a few times. By the way, I don't know him. I have no relationship to the son of a bitch. I never changed more than one word with him, like when you cross on the street, hello, hello, bye. But I never saw him not being drugged.
Yeah. Well, he wrote a book about his family had to perform an intervention because they couldn't keep booze in the house. He wrote about all this. they couldn't get booze in the house because if there was any amount of booze, he would drink it.
He would drink it.
And he was, the cocaine had eaten away his nose so much that he was constantly bleeding, and he would blow the blood in a tissue and just throw it on the floor. And so he's got a whole bunch of kids. He's got 3, 4 kids, maybe more. His son is a dead ringer for his father in the old days, and he writes books that are identical to his father's. So, and his name is Joe Hill, just like the labor activist. Because
oh boy,
Stephen is another.
My body. Oh, if I could choose, I would to ashes it reduce, and see the north wind blow my ash to where some flower blooms. Perhaps that faded flower there will come to life and bloom again. Good night to all of you, Joe Hill. That was his final poem as he was taken to
The firing squad.
fulfill his death sentence.
Yep.
You see the poetry of Joe Hill, and there is value in it. Not in this little thing that I just. By the way, can you believe I remember this shit?
Well, see, Stephen King is he's so obsessed with the 60s that he kind of lost his mind at a seminar, and this is after he became sober, so he says. And he was talking about the draft and how you have to learn how to you should get an education, because otherwise, you'll get drafted and end up in Iraq. And it's like, holy shit, we haven't had the draft for 30 years. He still talks about the Vietnam War. He still talks about Nixon. And it's just
more. When was it? 77, 78 that the draft ended? Actually, yeah, maybe even earlier, because in 1980 Reagan instituted the
selective service. No. Selective service?
It's a selective service registry. Of course, I was registered. Well, no, I couldn't register because I was born before the cutoff date. You had to be born before 1959, or rather after 1959, to register for the selective service, which of course never resulted in a draft, never resulted in any kind of calling. People just register. Somewhere, I imagine, there is a lot of information good for nothing, and that's about it.
Yeah. Okay, the Vietnam War. No, I mean, they just going back to the 60s, Stephen King believes all this horseshit about the Vietnam War, that there was a study that Vietnam War vets did that was, a massive, massive in-depth study. And if you were, you had a minimal chance of being drafted during the Vietnam War. And if you were drafted, you had about a 25% chance of being sent to Vietnam. And if you were sent to Vietnam, of that 25%, you had about another 25% chance of being drafted or being assigned to a combat arm.
Yeah.
So 60-odd% of the men who went to Vietnam were volunteers.
Yes. And that's another thing people don't realize.
No.
The vast majority of the soldiers who went to Vietnam volunteered to go to Vietnam.
They volunteered.
They were not sent there against their will.
The notion of the crazy Vietnam War vet comes from a movie by Peter Bogdanovich called Targets.
Yeah, big asshole. Yes.
Mention of that. And it's another case where Americans saw a movie and believed it was real, just like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest helped close mental institutions. And the movie was written by a guy who was on LSD the entire time he wrote it.
Yep.
It wasn't real. But what can you say? The Democrats are talking about reviving the draft again, and it's not going to happen because the military doesn't want draftees.
No.
Unfortunately,
Ironically, I would support it, but for reasons that are almost never used. I believe in a country of Minutemen.
in what?
In a country of Minutemen, I believe that the country should have a military service similar to Switzerland. I believe that if people could be called to war at a moment's notice, be they would make an effort to be informed. They would vote differently because right now it's no skin off my back.
Right. I don't know. A lot of stuff that works in other countries won't really work. I mean, our education system is so subverted. But
Yeah,
hey, nobody talks about this. The last fiscal year, the military's recruitment reached only 41% of
yeah.
the you know the number that they wanted. So that's the worst recruitment in American history.
In a long time, at least since we started with the professional army.
The reason that it is so low is because the military is now leftist. It's politicized, and you know,
But by the way, you and I know it isn't, but the impression we have is it is because you go to Fort Bragg, you go to Fort Campbell, you sit with the troops, you go to the mess with the troops. They're not more woke than they were 10
no,
years ago, man.
I'm talking
It
about the
it
leadership.
it is a small minority of the brass, most of which without command, like that asshole Miley, eh, who are fooling around with this shit in Washington and who are, I believe, not connected to the real army, to the real armed forces. But the perception is there
Well,
that it
see,
is changing.
okay, this leads into what we wanted to talk about: robots.
Yeah.
And we
Let me
mean,
before we get to robots. Mary says here, my late husband volunteered to Vietnam.
yeah,
This is what we were talking about. And cousin Jimmy, that I just mentioned, he volunteered to 5 tours
yeah.
in 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 Vietnam, and the only thing that if he were alive he would regret is not having lived long enough to piece on uh, Hanoi Jane's tomb.
Sure. And Coming Home, another movie that you know um, people believed as fact, and it was
Yeah.
a movie, a Hollywood movie. The Veterans Administration is screwed up, but so is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So is
Yeah. It's, so
Medicare.
is
So
every other government agency.
exactly.
Uh, by the
And
way, yourself here is telling us I volunteered for Vietnam, worked on generators for my entire tour. Amazing, is it? You say something, and all of a sudden they start coming out of the woodwork, and lo and behold, we were right.
well, this is the thing. And okay, we're going to talk about robots tonight, and we mean people programmed by
Yes.
an ideology or any other rigid. There's a
Yeah.
term for pedagogy.
We
Okay,
don't mean this guy.
we don't mean the guy from Lost in Space or Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet. Um, we mean people who were programmed to do one thing and one thing only, and if it doesn't work, they don't know what else to do. Um, it's been confirmed now that the Ukrainians, yeah, there we go, Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet. The Ukrainians had to ditch the training that we, the United States, gave them because it didn't work. And The Ukrainians are fighting in the method that's called the fourth generation of military affairs, where they're fighting in micro teams, and the micro teams have, say, a tank, motorized infantry, an aerial platform, and an artillery piece as the basic components. And they can call in mortar squads, they can call in machine gunners, they can call in anti-tank gunners. Oh, okay, usually an anti-tank gunner is part of that. And the United States has been absolutely opposed against this, opposed to this. The Australian Army wrote a report in 2017, following the battle.
You're only 100 years off. I mean, come on.
Following the Battle of Mosul in Iraq, where they said this battle proves that the concept is sound and that we should all start thinking about fighting in this way, because the micro teams are essentially autonomous on the battlefield. They know what their overall mission is. They know where all the other micro teams are, and they can get together and fight as a unified whole and then break apart. And what we trained the Ukrainians to do was to fight as Americans with massive air support. They don't have air support. So at the beginning of the counteroffensive, they're getting blown up by artillery. Americans haven't faced massed artillery since what? The Korean War, I guess.
I would say, yep.
The North Vietnamese didn't really have artillery to the level that, say, okay, the king of all of that was the First World War. And we did train to fight the Soviets, who, as the Russian Federation, they fight as Soviets, and their main weapon is artillery. We did train to do that, but that's why we developed helicopter gunships with anti-tank and anti-artillery missiles, and also, aircraft like the A-10 and the F-16 and the F-22 and all of that. Ukrainians don't have that. So the Ukrainians are under a hell of a lot of pressure from NATO to
deliver.
Wrap this thing up, boys, to deliver. And so they went in, they did what NATO asked, and then they said, all right, see, we told you we need more time, we need more weapons. And they went, oh,
we need the F-16s, assholes.
And that's why we finally, the whatever weird constipated blockage that was preventing us from training them with on F-16s and giving them F-16s, that was finally broken. But
we lost 6 months,
and we cost the Ukrainians men and equipment, and it's because whoever, I don't blame the instructors, I blame their commanders.
No, and for all what people say, and right after this, by the way, we're going to leave YouTube. But for all what idiots say, and I'm thinking again of Tucker Carlson and his ilk about Biden being gung-ho, Biden, it's been the spoke on the wheel. He is grudgingly delivered less than half of what the U.S. Congress approved, and much less than was necessary, and he's desperately trying to delay and obfuscate every step of the game, because I believe personally he doesn't give a shit about the present administration in Ukraine, who are more likely to uncover the misdeeds of the Biden criminal organization in Ukraine than any other.
You bet. Biden's in a tough place. He's accused Trump of being a Russian agent, and
while cashing in from the associates of Putin. We know that the wife of the mayor of Moscow sent $3.5 million, for instance, and we're waiting for these sons of bitches to explain what was she paying for.
Yeah. No, I mean, the problem with Biden is that he started believing his own propaganda. He started believing that he was invincible. He started believing that he was, well, he's a robot. He never,
Yeah,
he's not.
shit. He believes he's the daughter of a coal miner.
Yeah, and all of NATO is looking for the United States to play a leadership role, and this is just the way things are.
No.
And
But this is, remember, the third Obama term. We're back to leading from behind.
yeah, no, and part of that
How is that surprising?
Well, part of that is because Obama and Biden don't want to make decisions for which they can be held accountable.
Yeah.
And
by the way, let's say bye-bye to YouTube. People who are still watching in YouTube, I know that the broker Natalie is there. I'm sorry, broker Natalie, but this is the end of the road for this program on YouTube. You have the link both in the chat in YouTube and in the description underneath. Click on it and come to Odyssey to watch the rest of the program. And with that, night, you boob.